I saw this video and it's something that I think about a lot, so I wanted to watch it. Let's do it.
The traditional career is completely dead. Stick around and I'll tell you why.
Good soundtrack. Really good soundtrack, actually.
Hey everybody, it's Brian from Life After Layoff, and today I want to talk about the traditional career and why it's collapsing and is probably completely dead at this point.
Because they want you to do everything. They want you to know how to do everything. So the whole idea of working one job for the rest of your life and having this career at this place is gone. My stepdad worked at DuPont his entire life from the time that he was 19 years old until he retired when he was in his late 50s. And I just don't think that happens anymore. It's extremely hard to get a job like that now. And I think most people are looking at jobs as stepping stones to other places.
It's been drilled into most of us that we need to select a career at age 18,
Yeah.
put our 40 years in being a dedicated company person, collect our pension, and then move off into the sunset. And of course, that loyalty goes above all else, and we expect the same thing from the employer. However, for most of us in the modern workplace, we're finding that that just doesn't exist anymore. And in fact, I would suggest that the traditional career is completely dead. And in this video, I'm going to break down why I feel this has happened and what we can do about it going forward.
Let's get into
But before
it,
we get into that, if you're interested in learning how to reclaim control in your career and start to act with more authority and conviction instead of being very reactive, check out my free newsletter. And in it, I share concise, actionable tips on how to approach your jobs.
I am always interested in things like this. I think that as far as interview skills and being a person who exists in a company and all of that, I'm a little bit behind. So it's always cool to be able to see somebody who makes
with more
videos
authority and
about this kind of
conviction. And if you're somebody that's in an active job search or you care about your career in the long term,
finding jobs is really, really difficult too. I think that most people who complain about sending out a bunch of resumes just aren't very good at sending out resumes. I don't think I'm very good at sending out resumes. That's why I think that I don't get very, very good response on resumes that I send out.
Leave the newsletter for you. Keep in mind, it's absolutely free, so hope to see you over there. Okay, so many of us remember our grandparents or our parents working long traditional careers.
Totally.
At age 18, they enter into the workforce and they land their first job without much effort, whether it's through nepotism or simply filling
My stepdad got his job because his dad worked there.
out a basic.
My stepdad once told me that every dollar that was put into his family, every piece of food that was put into his mouth was paid for by DuPont from the time that he was 3 years old or something like that.
Resume and hand delivering it to the receptionist.
But it's not that way
at the
anymore. I
front
mean, he
desk.
was forced out of that company. It's so bizarre the way that these companies have changed, but they really have.
And in those days, it might have been called the personnel department. But then they immediately get hired without much trouble, and then they proceed to work a very fulfilling 45-year career.
And make good money.
Getting a great pension plan.
Yep.
They have a going-away party. Everybody wishes them well. They ride off into the sunset in their Winnebago and head down to Florida to buy prime Florida real estate at a fraction of what we pay for it today.
Yeah.
And under their breath, they grumble about how the younger generation just doesn't want to work. And in their day, loyalty, hard work, and perseverance were valued above all else. And that
You ever see that video where the person's role playing as their parent? And they're like, did you shake their hand? Did you look them in the eye? And their kid's like, yeah, I did those things. Like, I don't know. That's what I did to get my job. Yeah, I bet you did, man. When half the workforce wasn't here that was there before, when people of a different skin color couldn't get jobs, I bet it was a lot easier to just walk in and shake a hand and get hired.
It's just lacking in today's generations. And back then, employers did treat their employees with a degree of loyalty and vice versa. And there was an expectation that that would be the case. They didn't just lay off people constantly, and you could be not great at a particular job, but they would move you into a different department and all would be well. But in today's day of instant gratification, where everything needs to be at your fingertips, and if you don't have results immediately, you're only worried about the next news cycle or the next earnings report. And even though you might have hit a grand slam for them,
everybody has to have growth constantly, and if you are not seen to be adding immediate value to that company, they do not want you there. They don't want to keep you around. I mean, you'll see this in all the gurus online as well. They're not trying to build a team anymore. They're trying to put together a team. They want to find the best people because they know those best people are out there. You go on YouTube and you type in programmer tutorials, and you'll find people who could write books about how to write code. The majority of people who write code aren't like that, and it takes them time, and they have to work at it, and they don't have the skills built, and they're not savant level geniuses at it. And because of that, there's this really big disconnect in what an employee should be. They're looking for the best of the best in D-rate cities, and they're offering no money for it. And when they don't think that's you, they're just not going to hire you. That's why these teams sit so vacant for so long. Really, I think the problem is that the people who are in charge don't have a lot of intelligence in their own field, and they're not able to train and teach and grow people. Back in the day, I think people were so much better at that. I think that the bosses knew how to get people to work into their positions, not to just find people who might be the best of the best. Well, try him out, and if he doesn't work, we can always fire him. That's the new way of thinking.
The year before, you could be on the chopping block the next year. It's a "what have you done for me lately" type of environment. And I do believe this is related to a world where we are overly connected with instant data at our fingertips, and things moving even faster, and even job boards. If you look at how hiring happened back then, hiring was a very localized thing.
Yeah.
There was a company based in a certain geographic region, and the people who lived in that geographic region would often work for the one or two major employers in that area. And so that's why you saw a lot of nepotism. You knew somebody who worked at that
chemical plants, Dow, DuPont. That's who employed people in the coal mines. That's who employed people in West Virginia forever. And now those companies need less and less people because there's more and more automation, and so there's just not a lot of jobs around, period. I got into a conversation with a guy the other day who was talking about how, you Americans think that things are so bad for you. And a lot of times they are. I try to explain to him that it's not all Los Angeles mansions and New York high-rises. A lot of our places are well below the poverty line on average. The place that I live is as well. I mean, there's whole counties in West Virginia where there's no jobs available and people are just living off welfare. I mean, it's really, really bad. And so there's this huge competitiveness for jobs that aren't even good, don't even pay good money. $16 an hour is considered to be a great job here, an amazing job. And that doesn't even pay your bills. You still have to have multiple incomes in order to make that work, or have roommates or whatever. But people just think, oh my goodness, that's not $10 an hour, so that's amazing.
Factory, and you got your foot in the door, or your father worked there and brought you in with them. But nowadays, we're so connected.
I think that if I wanted a job now, if I was looking for a job, I would only go for places where I know someone there already. I would say, hey, I'm looking for a job doing X thing. Do you have any openings in your company there? And they would say, I don't know, let me go ask. And then they'd go ask, and they'd find out, and they'd put in a good word for you. And that gets you in the door way easier. I once got someone a job at a company that I was working at, and the interviewer literally said before or the boss, the person who owned the company, said before my friend walked in to get the interview, they said, make sure you do really well in that interview because she's going to offer you a job afterwards.
In such a global economy, and the rise of job boards and LinkedIn and all of these other tools, and in some cases, people are applying for thousands of jobs all across the globe from the comfort of their own home. And that's a drastic difference from what it was like back in the day. That's
why work from home jobs are so difficult to get now. Everyone says, why don't you get a work from home job? Because you're competing against the whole world. And a lot of people are securing multiple work from home jobs at the same time because they're way more talented than I am. And that's a skill issue. I'm not trying to blame the world on that, but I do miss the days when the tech company in Charleston, West Virginia would be looking for tech people who lived in Charleston, West Virginia because they wanted to build a community around it and they had no other choice. That was a lot better. It's so difficult to be in a place where you don't have access to the same opportunities and resources as other people, but you're still competing globally with them. Now, once again, I'm not trying to complain here. I'm not trying to oh, woe is me. That's not my personality type. I have tried desperately to pull myself up by my bootstraps for over a decade now. I believe in hard work. I believe that it pays off. I always put in a bunch of effort into everything that I do. But it's really difficult. I don't think that there's any way of denying that at this point.
The reasons why it's so difficult to get a job in today's market, you're competing with thousands of other people across the globe. So the competition is much more fierce.
Totally.
Furthermore, companies have the short-term mentality of what have you done for me lately, and this cycle of layoffs. And if you're not familiar with the cycle of layoffs, what I've observed is that layoffs tend to follow the same pattern as the economy. So you have a starting point, and the economy will expand and expand, and companies bloat and bloat and bloat. And then there's usually some major event that causes companies to lay off a bunch of people, they right size, and then they get back to business. And I've observed that this cycle happens over about a 10-year period.
Yeah.
However, it does seem like it's shortening and shortening and exponentially moving quicker.
Well,
So
everything's
that's not
doing
necessarily
that. The velocity of everything is just on an upward trajectory currently. It's insane, and I think it's because of the speed of technology development. You hire in all these people to build the technology that replaces them,
great thing for the average employee. If we look back into
and
the
that can
late
go
90s,
faster and faster
we had
the faster
the
technology
dot-com
grows.
bubble. So you had all these companies like Amazon and eBay and Google all rising up and starting to take a prominent place in the market. So companies kind of built up their infrastructure. Everybody was hiring. It was a heyday. You could just throw money at the market and double and triple your investments. And of course, the dot-com bubble burst and those good times came to an end when we had a major event in the early 2000s, which was 9/11. So then after that, all these companies stopped hiring. There was a lot of panic in the
what just happened with
market.
COVID.
Everybody started laying off. And then there was a right sizing that happened, or I should say a right sizing. So then the economy started to pick up again. Companies started gradually over the period of a few years hiring and hiring. The bloat started happening over and over again. And the next major event happened, which was the prime real estate bubble bursting in 2008.
Yep.
So the same thing happened. Everything reset. Companies went through mass layoffs, and there was a lot of uncertainty in the market. But over a 10-year period from 2010 to 2020,
Tech blew up.
we had a pretty
You had a point in time where you could go for 6 months to get a certificate, and then you could get a job making over $100,000 a year with basically no skills, and they would teach you basically everything that you needed to know. And that's just not the way that it is anymore. People are so angry. People are saying, "Oh, tech jobs are dead now." They're not. You have to learn a lot more now. You really, really do. You're going to have a coding interview. You're going to be asked all kinds of questions about algorithms and data structures. There's a lot of things that you have to know how to do very well now, and people don't learn that in 6 months. I've been in my program I'm in my 5th semester now. 4th semester, only 4 semesters. Someone at the end of my 2nd year of it now, and it's insane. There's so much. Every single month, it's something brand new that just beats me down, and I have to work really hard to understand it and learn just massive amounts of information. It's brutally hard, but that skill building is what makes you valuable in the job market. I think that the era of getting easy careers is dead, but there is still opportunity out there. It's really complicated. You have to be able to afford to take a job that's not very good at the bottom to prove yourself, to maybe work your way up or leverage yourself into other positions. So that means that you have to work hard to try to figure out a way to set yourself up financially that you can afford to do that you can afford to move to an expensive city without getting paid enough to be there yet. It's very, very complex, the game that we're playing now. And I think a lot of people are just cracking underneath that pressure. And I made a video about jobs before and caught some flack for it. But and people love to talk to me as if I am the one out here who's angry and pissed off. And that's because they've seen people who are angry and pissed off. But I'm fighting for those people. Not everyone can get out here and do these things. Not everyone has the resources to go to college for a really difficult STEM degree and has the support structure to successfully pass their classes, learn what they need to learn, and get that degree. When I was 18 years old, I was living in a $400 a month apartment, working full-time as a janitor to try to go to college while also trying to be a musician, and it didn't work. I failed out of college. I ended up dropping out of 2 separate colleges because I thought maybe being an electrical engineer would be better for me than trying to be a psychologist. And what actually was going on is I just didn't have the mental capacity to do it. I was a child. I had gone through high school, never had to try very hard in high school. I didn't know how to focus at all. Still really am catching up to my peers on how to focus on things. And I just couldn't handle it. I could not handle it. And so for the next 10 years of my life, was just being brutalized by the terrible job market in my local town, trying to work minimum wage jobs, not being able to be successful anywhere that I went, couldn't fit in with a group of people. I had problems, yes, but I'm still a person who struggled because of that. I didn't have a family to back me up. My family has tons of financial troubles of their own. There's no golden parachute or safety net for me. They barely have enough money to take care of themselves. So I'm out here struggling all the time myself. And I hate that people are so bitter towards their fellow men and women and friends. We're all trying to make it, and no one deserves to starve out here. Like, I often explain to people how there are people out there who cause harm to other people, but healthy individuals don't want to hurt other people. So if you're hurting other people, there must be something going on in your brain. And how able are you to just directly change something about yourself? You probably have mannerisms and behaviors that continue on no matter what you try to do, and you notice these mistakes that you continually make. And then there's some people that those mistakes and those behaviors and mannerisms affect their entire life, and you just think that they deserve to starve to death. You just think that that's just how it is, man. Well, it's not that way for you. You have it pretty good. How is that fair that because you rolled the dice lucky when you were born into whatever situation and your life went the way that it should have and you figured everything out, that you just get to have good things and they don't because their life didn't go that way? It's an RNG game out here, and you were blessed and they weren't. You need to have a little bit of kindness in your heart for other people.
Uninterrupted period of growth where companies just bloated and bloated and bloated. And I'm sitting here thinking like, gosh, this is not going to end well. I was waiting for this right sizing event that seemed to be pretty consistent every 7 to 8 to 10 years. So lo and behold, what happens in 2020? The entire economy shuts down due to the pandemic. And of course, ever since then, now we've seen these companies right sizing and then right sizing.
Well, they were at the beginning hiring, or they obviously had to let people, but they hired for a little while. I mean, you can see that there's little bumps here where people, and this graph probably doesn't go far enough to show it. In 2020, it was really brutal, but they did start hiring again, but now it's tanking all over
every
again.
couple of years, because now it seems like the entire employment market is being destroyed. And at this point, I'm not convinced we'll ever come back to a sense of normalcy, certainly not the traditional market that we used to know. And if you look back at your parents' and your grandparents' generations in the workplace, they weren't nearly as susceptible to these layoffs. I'm not saying that they never happened and that people didn't get furloughed, but it wasn't as common as it is today.
Not
and that's
like
how
now.
people got to work 40 plus years relatively uninterrupted. And at the same time, there wasn't this massive pool of labor for these companies to recruit. So if they laid people off, they had to be much more careful and concise. Whereas nowadays, they can lay off anytime they want, and they've got a million candidates at their fingertips. And the next major decoupling in the workplace is
You can always find someone better. It's the same reason that the dating pool is so toxic right now, is that there's always someone who is going to be better for you on the next swipe, on the next guy that you hang out with, on the next girl that you hang out with. There's a person who fits your ideals more. And it wasn't that way back in the day. You found someone who you could deal with, and you learned to do that. You learned to live with them forever. You didn't constantly look for someone new. You didn't have a bunch of people constantly messaging you and telling you how much better they treat you than the significant other you already have.
back then there was a defined benefits plan. Employers would very commonly pay for an entirety of an employee's retirement plan. So it was through pensions and that sort of thing.
That's
these
crazy.
defined benefit programs.
Paid lunches,
and
too.
At some point in time in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there was a
Never worked
switch
anywhere that
from
paid lunch.
defined
Always had
benefits
to clock out.
to a defined contribution plan, where the employer then shifted all of the burden onto the employee and then only gave.
Actually, a lot of jobs that I've worked, they didn't give you breaks, period. You would work for 8-9 hours, and they wouldn't give you a break unless you were working a double, which was 12 hours, and then you'd get a 30-minute or an hour break, depending on how busy you were.
A small match as a result. And they tried to
And I
pitch
don't
it
think
as
that's legal, but in this area, you're just happy to have a job most of
great
the time.
benefit to the employee, but the reality is that employees now are on the hook for paying for all of their retirement, and that was a major shift in the employment arrangement. To make matters even worse, companies put in long vesting periods, 4+ years, to claim the money that they would match you. And so in some cases, it might only be 3 or 4% of your income that they would match,
Yeah.
and you had to work a certain number of years, usually at least 4,
To even start
before
getting
you
that.
would make claim to the employer's money.
A lot of times
So in
they'll
other
fire
words,
you
if the
before
employer
you-
matched
before
a
you
bunch
get
of
to that
money
point.
for you, and they laid you off after year 2,
Yeah.
they weren't on the hook for the last 2 years of vesting, and they would take all that money back from you.
Yep.
So employers are even less committed to the employee as a result. And so when the older generations are venting about how the younger generations don't have loyalty, it really goes both sides. And in fact, I would say it's the employer side more than the employee. The employee is fairly reactive in the relationship. The employer is now laying people off at a moment's
If you treat me well and pay me what I'm worth, I will do everything in my power to be the best employee you have. I have never found a place that will take me on as an employee and wants to do right enough by me to make me want to be there. I I mean, I'm talking just don't overwork me until the point that I'm literally falling apart and having mental breakdowns. And I know that some people are going to have a problem with that statement, but I've been put in situations where I don't know what I'm doing and I'm being forced to work 80, 90 hours a week in order to do that. I mean, open to close, 7 days a week, 18 hours a day sometimes, just unbelievable shifts. And I remember one time I was working at a place and I thought to myself, this is how like mentally taken over by that job I was. I said, if they would just let me sleep in the bag, I could just sleep for a few hours back there and then I'd open the place after you close late, you close 1 or 2 in the morning and then you wake up, 8 o'clock to start opening the restaurant. And I remember thinking I would just sleep in the back. They could just put a cot back there. Like that's how broken it starts to make you when you're being abused by your employer. And I'm making $11 an hour at the time, and had been there for multiple years.
Notice because now they have a broader pool of candidates than they ever had back in the 70s, 60s, 50s. And in addition to that, they're not paying for retirement programs like they used to. So there isn't a sense of loyalty. They've decoupled from the employee and made themselves much more free of that shackle. And on top of it, we have the rise of disruptive technologies like AI. Now, I've talked about AI in other videos, so I'm not going to necessarily go into a lot of depth here. And it's not to say that there wasn't disruptive technologies in the past, because there certainly have been over time.
Totally.
In our generations, and I would include the generations that have already retired recently, there has never been a more disruptive technology to enter into the
No,
workforce
there
conversation
hasn't.
than artificial intelligence. It stands to outplace millions of jobs, and it's another dynamic that the employers can.
AI is one of those things that people love to complain about, though, and I don't think we've even begun to see the effects of what is going to happen with it. I think that there's going to come a time where 50% of the world is going to be unemployed. 50% of Americans are going to be without jobs, and that's going to be because there's no jobs to be had. And all of these people out there, these pull yourself out by your bootstrap people, are going to impede ourselves from surviving as a race, because the human race, by the way, they're going to impede us from being able to survive as people, because they're going to not believe that that's a problem, because they're going to be some of the people who are in the whatever percentage that are still employed, because they're the nepo babies, the people whose dad got them this job, who they were raised welding and they still weld, and because I have a job, everyone else can just get a job. Just have the exact life I did. That's what people think.
Can detach loyalty. They don't even need the employee the same way that they used to. So when you look at the concept of loyalty being dead, it really is. And as a further extension of that, careers being dead. The traditional career no longer exists the way it did before. And let's face it, it's never going to get back to where it was.
Yeah,
and
no.
so as a result, the way we approach work is changing drastically.
That's what I once said, that I think gig work will become the ultimate in the world. I think that as a doctor, you will have a gig board that you will sign into, and you'll see patients queue up, and you'll be able to go to any of these places and take care of those patients. I think that you'll probably walk into Walmart and you'll either be able to pay with money or you'll be able to pay with time, and there will be an app that you'll log into, and it will give you real simple instructions of, oh, there's a pallet of this back there, get that and put it on this shelf and stock that shelf. And for every hour that you do something like that, you'll earn credits with Walmart, and then you'll be able to use those credits to buy things. I think we'll end up having a lot of gig work in the future, and the idea of getting a paycheck from somewhere will be a thing of the past. You'll get paid per job for basically every single job, except for startups and companies that people are building. But all the big major, what you think of as long-term careers, or not even long-term careers, but a lot of what you think of as jobs, that's the word I'm looking for, but a lot of what you're thinking of as jobs, McDonald's, Walmart, anything that can become giggable, I think will, because then the companies don't have to take care of their employees and they can save money that way. And you have to be able to take care of your investors, and that means you have to turn profits every single year. And how you turn profits, you cut costs. So if you can cut the cost of your labor by 70%, because you're not paying people to be there when you don't need them, you're only paying people when you do need them. And if you're a company like Walmart, you're not even paying them, you're just giving product away so that you can afford a product that for yourself is cheaper than the money that it costs. So you're just losing the profit margin, which isn't that high anyways. So, yeah, I think that's what'll end up happening.
And it's seeming to evolve quicker and quicker. So, what's next for our generations who are still in the workplace? Well, I think you're going to see a lot more short term assignments being much more commonplace. The idea of job hopping is probably
Totally.
going to be a little less.
Contracts. I often think that that's my future as someone who's working in tech, is that I'm never going to work somewhere for more than 2 years. There'll be a project that I'm working on, and if I do really well, they might offer me another project, but I'll just be signed up for that project.
Taboo, because let's face it, people are getting laid off before they even show up for day one on a job. So how can you expect people to have solid
Overreaction.
resumes when you're laying them off constantly? And in fact, if a company lays you off and then later on the same hiring manager that just laid off a bunch of their staff starts to say that they're eliminating candidates because they have too much job hopping on their resume, it's a pretty hypocritical position
Yeah,
to
no,
be in. And
100%.
furthermore, I think we're going to see a continued rise in contract positions as employers try to avoid hiring these expensive full-time employees that they've got to pay benefits
Yep.
for. They've got to pay 401ks that, let's face it, they're probably not going to vest on anyway. But they're moving further and further away from the traditional employment model themselves. And furthermore, I think employees are going to have to
They want the best of both worlds. It's dishonest actors. I mean, that's all it is. People are still operating under the assumption that we're being told the truth, but lying has become so commonplace that no one cares about telling lies anymore. No one feels bad. There's no consequences to it. It's expected. And we're lying about the expectation of lying. We still behave as though we're being told the truth, but we're not. We're being lied to by the government. We're being lied to by presidential candidates. We're being lied to about jobs and the opportunities there. We're being lied to about what it is that we're supposed to do in this world. It's all lies now. That's the meta now. You lie. That's what you do. Lie, cheat, steal, kill, win. Everybody's doing it. That's the truth of it all. And that makes it really hard.
evaluate how they're approaching funding their retirement. You're not going to be able to rely on an employer funding even a 401k at this point anymore when they're laying off so frequently. And that can be particularly disruptive for people who are moving further into their careers and they're starting to see the twilight of their career or that retirement event coming up. And they
I think about that all the time now. I keep thinking, I'm 29 right now. Man, I have got to get my retirement lined up right now. Right now, I have to figure out what my retirement game is going to be. Because it'll be here before I know it. And by the time I'm 45, 50, it's too late. Way too late.
might be realizing, oh crap, I might not be ready for this. Of course, at the same time, there's think tanks suggesting that the retirement age should be moved back to 70 or even beyond, which I'm starting to wonder, is this all a planned agenda? But this is all necessitating us to look at our
I like this
careers
guy a
much
lot,
more
actually.
strategically, much more as a free agent, and much more as the CEO of our career, because we won't be able to rely on an employer to look out for our best interest the way our grandparents or our parents may have. And again, if you're somebody that's looking to reclaim control in your career, check out my newsletter. It is designed to do that. And check out my website,
What's your name, bud?
alifeafterlayoff.com.
You
Lead
made a
dead.
really good
Stick
channel.
around. The traditional career is completely, and why it's collapsing and is probably completely dead at this point. It's been drilled into most of us that we're, and why it's.
Can you introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, it's Brian from Life After Layoff, and
Brian. Nice to meet you, Brian. This video is excellent. I think you and I are very like-minded on a lot of things. I really agree with you on basically everything that you said. It's super bizarre the way that things have started tilting at this point, and it's bizarre to live in this world where all of the standard advice that you get doesn't work anymore, and everybody looks at you like you're the jerk for not just following their advice when you tried to for over a decade of your life and it didn't turn out well. So now you're trying to blaze a new path that, oh man, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's working, but it's the only thing that you know how to do. So I appreciate you making this video. It was really good. Everyone go subscribe and like. It was a really good video. Appreciate it, man.